Welcome back everyone, it's Garland here bringing you another Neverwinter video. In today's video we're going to be going over the Mod 14 Warlock DPS build and guide. Today we're going to be focusing on Hellbringer. So included in this video is going to be Hellbringer AoE as well as Hellbringer single target. Now of course this is if you utilize the loadout system. If you don't, then you can simply make a mix of the two. If you have any questions regarding that, or you can't afford multiple loadouts right now, go ahead and leave me a comment below and I'll try to help you as best as I can. So let's go right ahead and jump right in. We're going to start with the boons. Now as always for the boons, I'm not going to go over every single campaign boon. You can watch previous videos and skip to the boon section. I only do the updated module per release now. So we are looking at the Mod 14 boons, which is going to be Ravenloft, and these are going to be the same for your AoE loadout as well as your single target. I'm taking 3 out of 3 for Undying Death, which is going to increase your damage versus undead by 15%. It's a no-brainer here. Anytime you have something that's going to increase your damage to a mob type, percentile-based damage is always better than raw statistical values. So the 1200 recovery, the 1200 movement, the 4800 hit points, or the 1200 control resist. The only other valid option really is the 4800 hit points if you want to synergize with Aura of Courage. But strictly speaking for DPS, you're going to want that 15% damage versus undead. Now coming up top here, we don't have very many options this module, so we're taking Bloodlust for DPS. Every critical hit against an enemy has a chance to add a stack. At 10 stacks, you gain 2400 increased power for 10 seconds, and it has a 1-minute cooldown. Nothing tremendous here. Power is pretty irrelevant at this point, so an extra 2400 power isn't really that big of a deal. However, the other options, unfortunately, just aren't suited for DPS right now. That's going to wrap it up for the boons. Let's go ahead and jump into the companions. Alright, so taking a look at the companions, as far as your AoE loadout goes, you can use different things here, but that's completely up to you. For instance, I'm currently still using the Siege Master, the Air Archon, the Earth Archon, the Wild Hunt Rider, and then of course your summoned is going to be the Shulton Tiger. Now, if you don't want to use the Wild Hunt Rider, you can replace this with whatever you want. If you want to use a Razorwood here, then you can use a Razorwood here. If you want to use something else, that's completely up to you. Now, as far as your single target, I typically will take the Wild Hunt out and put the Razorwood in. Now, if you want to take your Siege out and put a Fire Archon here, if you're not in a super endgame melty group, you're not melting everything within a minute or 2 minutes, you can activate that bonus on the Fire Archon. You'll do 7% more damage when the boss hits its 50% HP threshold. That's completely up to you on how you want to manage your companions. The main objective here is, of course, you want to get your hands on a Shulton Tiger. We're still, of course, using Bonding Runestones. You want to maximize those to rank 14. And then I'm using Bronzewood rings here and a +4 necklace. And I still use brutal enchantments on my companion for the power crit. Now, you can use whatever rings you have access to. So you remember, you got to balance your own statistics. So if you don't like the power crit on this, you can use a different ring. The same with the necklace. I'm using a bold necklace +4. Am I ever going to upgrade to a +5? I don't think it's worth it in my own eyes for that minimal statistical increase. So for instance, the bold necklace is crit armor pen. If you want to get a fierce necklace for power crit, that's completely up to you. You have to maintain your own stats and hitting those maximum stat thresholds. That's pretty much going to wrap it up for the companions. Not much has really changed. There are other options out there for single target companions as well. If you have any questions, always leave me a comment below. Let's move along to the mounts now. There aren't any huge major differences between your AoE loadout and your single target loadout. As far as my AoE loadout, I use the T-Rex as well as the 4000 power. Now, as far as single target goes, I don't have the swarm yet. I'm a slacker, so if you want to use the swarm for the 5% buff to yourself and the 5% debuff to the enemy, that's completely up to you. Technically, the Tensors will self-buff you more, but we all know the Tensors is very clunky and the animation is very bad. So it's up to you. Do you really want to use the Tensors and sacrifice some time for a single target, or do you simply want to use the swarm and help your teammates as well as yourself? So that's completely up to you. If you have all of those legendary mounts, then you can play around with them and decide what you actually want to use. I will eventually get the swarm and change to the swarm most likely, just because the Tensors is very clunky and I'm not a fan of it. I wish they would change the animation to it and then it would be golden. Now, as far as your stable, there's not any difference between single target and AoE, and you can pretty much run whatever you want. Unfortunately, the mount insignia bonuses aren't that great. They're very minor bonuses. So we're still using Protector's Camaraderie, Cavalry's Warning if you have a legendary, Shepherd's Devotion, Artificers, and then Assassin's Covenant. Now, a lot of Warlocks have migrated over to Gladiator's Gow for the movement speed. They've completely scrapped Assassin's Covenant. That's completely fine, guys. There's nothing wrong with that. Assassin's Covenant is very, very minor. You're only gaining a very small percentile of power from Assassin's Covenant. It's practically not worth it. So, whatever insignias you want to run, there's probably nothing wrong with it. The main important one here is definitely Artificers. You definitely want to make sure you're running this. Other than that, they're all minor bonuses for the most part. Now, as far as your insignias, you want to strive to get all epic insignias. And then again, I look at the mount system as bonus statistics. So if you're missing just a little bit of armor pen or a little bit of crit, you can always make up those statistics via the insignias. I pretty much stick to dominance. I do have some aggression for armor pen, and I do have some skill. However, I can eventually scrap all these aggression if I choose. I believe my armor penetration right now is like 108%. Well, that's 8% too much. So I could eventually scrap all of this back page insignia, but, you know, it doesn't really matter, to be honest. That's pretty much going to wrap it up for the mounts. As always, any questions, leave them below, guys. Alright, let's jump right into the gear, the build, and the powers. We're going to start solely on the AoE. So we're looking at Hellbringer AoE. Now, I've migrated over to the Mod 14 armor set. A lot of the bonuses are very nice. Now, of course, you can use a plethora of things. If you still want to use your primal armor, there's nothing wrong with that. Wherever you're at in the game, chances are for AoE situations, you're going to be fine. The gear doesn't really matter that much. You just want to make sure you're hitting all those statistical thresholds. The 100% critical strike, the 100% armor pen, and then whatever amount of power you're currently sitting at. So like I said, I have migrated over to the Mod 14 Curse Lord set. That's going to include the helmet, the chest plate, the arms, and the boots. I'm still using the Pilgrim set. I have managed to exalt the weapon. I have not exalted the offhand yet. I still need one more piece for that. The Pilgrim set is a very nice set for AoE. As far as your 3-piece set, of course we're still using the Orca set. They refuse to give us a new DPS set. I don't know why. Maybe eventually down the road they'll give us a new DPS set, but unfortunately nothing outperforms the Orca set. So that is going to be your necklace, your belt, and then of course the Orcus artifact. As far as your rings, you want to strive to get that Shadow Stalker +5, as well as the Undead Slayer for the undead damage for mod 14. Works very well with the boon. As far as your shirt and pants, we're still using the primal pants, or I'm sorry, the upper primal paints for the daily power 3% increased damage, and then as well as the primal bottoms. As far as your artifacts, I look at the artifacts as making up a huge statistical bonus. I try to always strive to have at least power as the first stat, and then whatever the secondary stat is. For instance, I've been using the Hunter Ranger Sigil for a long time because it's power recovery. And then I've been using the Wizard Sigil because it's power crit. And then of course you have to sacrifice one slot for your 3-piece set. Now, as far as your active artifact goes, you can use whatever you want. I've been using the DC Sigil for a very long time. I've grown accustomed to using it, and that's what I prefer to use overall. However, there's a plethora of artifacts that you can actually place here now that will do, different objectives depending on the group that you're running with. Now, as far as my armor enchantment goes, I'm using a bark shield right now. However, I do plan on switching this to an Eclipse. Why the Eclipse? It's basically unlimited shadow slip. So when you're on AoE and you're running through the dungeon, you can basically just super speed through the dungeon. So I will be eventually changing the AoE to the Eclipse, and I'll be moving this bark shield to the single target loadout. Now, as far as my defense slots go, I use Pure Radiance for the 4,000 maximum HP. That's solely to coincide with the Paladin's Aura of Courage. You want to maximize your HP as high as you can get it. So I choose to use 100% rank 14 Radiance in all my defensive slots. If you want to use dual-statted enchantments, if you want to use tri-statted enchantments, you can use whatever you want. A lot of Warlocks like to use Black Ice not only in their offensive slots, but as well there's their defensive slots. It's all personal preferences, guys, so whatever you want to use is completely up to you. Now, as far as the weapon, we're going to look at the Unparalleled Lightning. There's still a lot of confusion because the Lightning has changed so much over the past several mods. The Lightning is still probably the best in slot as far as AoE situations go for the Warlock. You're still going to be able to multi-proc a lot of the encounters, and you're going to be able to spread that damage around. I still use the Lightning. I still enjoy the Lightning. There's some Warlocks that will use a Dread on their AoE. There's nothing wrong with that. If you want to use a Dread, you be my guest. I prefer the Lightning overall. Now, as far as offensive slots, I stack Radiance for the 1000 power. Again, if you want to use dual-statted enchantments, you want to use tri-statted enchantments, such as Black Ice, that's completely up to you. I have my statistics balanced a specific way that lets me use the Pure Radiance to maximize my power gain. So that's completely up to you guys. Now, if we go ahead and look at the artifact powers for AoE, of course, we're just going to be using Hellish Rebuke. And then off the offhand, Flames of Empowerment. I think that's going to cover the gear as far as AoE. If you guys have any questions, be sure to leave me a comment below. Alright guys, and on your screen right now is going to be the build for Hellbringer AoE situations. I'm not going to discuss or go in depth on the build itself, but I will leave this up on the screen if you want to pause it. If you have any questions regarding it, you can always leave me a comment below. And now we're going to jump right into the powers as well. So as far as dailies, I'm going to use Brood of Hadar as well as Tyrannical. And then for personals, I'm still using ACC and Flames of Empowerment. We're using Hellish Rebuke as your main at will. Now, as your secondary, you can use whatever you want. You want to use Hand of Blight, you want to use Eldritch Splash, you want to use Dark Spiral, whatever you use as your secondary. I very, very rarely will ever hit my secondary. You want to be spamming Hellish Rebuke as much as you can. Now, as far as the powers itself, you can use Dread Theft. If you so choose, Dread Theft will multi-proc the lightning as well as coincide with the Aura of Courage damage from a paladin. It works out very well. Fiery Bolt. Of course, your bread and butter is your Pillar of Power. And then I'm still using personal preference of Hadar's Grasp, which also will multi-proc the lightning. So, whatever powers you want to use, that's completely up to you. It's AoE situation. 99% of the time you should be slaughtering trash mobs in dungeons anyway, so you should be running through trash mobs pretty fast. It doesn't really matter what powers you use to destroy those mobs. You want to use Blades of the Vanquished Armies, you go right ahead, guys. You want to use Warlock's Bargain, you go right ahead. So, that's going to wrap it up for the powers and the feats for the AoE Hellbringer Warlock. We're going to be jumping into the single target now. Alright, moving right along. So now we're going to talk about the Hellbringer single target gear. So as far as your helmet goes, there's several options you can use. I'm just going to mainly stick to the Mod 14 Curse Lord's helmet. However, if you want to slap a Rex Corona in here still, or anything else for that matter, whatever statistical values you're looking for, I'm sure there's a specific helmet that you can plop in here for single target. Now, there are differences from the single target and the AoE, and that's the rest of the gear. We're going to move into the Hag's Rags now. Your ranged powers do 3% more damage. So this is huge for single target situations. As well as I'm going to be using the Terrored Grips. Your encounter powers do 3% more damage. Now you can substitute Eye Stalkers in here when they work. They will eventually work. And that's completely up to you. And then finally, I'm specifically using the Boots of the Willed. Now, a lot of Warlocks like the Enduring Boots, and we are going to migrate to the Enduring Boots most likely in Mod 15. However, as of Mod 14, I'm mainly playing Hellbringer solely for single target and AoE. So your at-will powers do 3% more damage on Boots of the Willed. I do a lot of damage with Hellish Rebuke. So I've stuck with the Boots of the Willed and it has worked out well for me. However, if you can't get your hands on a pair of Boots of the Willed, you can farm the Enduring Boots and they will function the same, pretty much. The Enduring Boots have a 3% damage increase overall as long as your stamina remains filled. So that's completely up to you guys what boots you want to run here. Now, as far as the weapon, I'm using the Primal set here. I do have both Exalted. Now, again, for the 3-piece set, of course, the Orca set. I mentioned already in the video, for DPS, unfortunately, there's nothing better or nothing that's going to outperform for DPS other than the Orca set. So that is the Orcus Artifact, the belt, and the necklace. The rings don't change. I'm still using a Shadow Stalker 5, as well as an Undead Slayer plus 5. Same thing with the shirt and pants. Neither of these change. We're using the Primal set. As far as your artifacts, again, I mentioned earlier, as long as you are balancing your statistics, it doesn't really matter what artifacts you use. So for single target, for instance, I still use the Wizard Sigil. However, I swap in an Eye of the Giant. Now, for your active artifact, I highly recommend the Soulsight Crystal. As far as single target DPS, there's not much that's going to outperform this. You're going to gain 50% damage. So, yeah, that's a pretty big hunk of damage that you're going to want to utilize. Now, as far as enchantments go, we are going to be using the Fey Touch for single target. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I stack all Radiance for offensive slots and all Radiance in my defensive slots as well. I did not mention that I do run 4 demonic enchantments in my rings, but again, you guys have to balance your own statistics. I can't tell you what enchantments to run, guys. You have to balance your own statistics. So I do use 4 demonic 14s for the stats that I do need to balance and keep in line. Now, I already mentioned about the armor enchantment previously. The bark shield here is completely fine. However, if you want to use a soul forge or something else, that's completely up to you. It's again personal preference. I like to stick mainly with the bark shield. As far as armor reinforcements, you can make up those statistics however you see fit, guys. If you're still lacking armor pen, you can put armor pen on the left-hand side. You can stack power as far as reinforcement goes. You can stack crit as far as armor reinforcement goes. That's completely up to you. As always, on the right-hand side for your reinforcements, I strongly suggest the action point gain. So that's going to be on your necklace, 2 rings, and belt. As far as your artifact powers here, again, we're using Hellish Rebuke. And then on the offhand, we're going to be using Flames of the Empowerment. That's pretty much going to wrap it up for the gear. Any questions, as always, comment below. On your screen now is going to be the Hellbringer single target build. Again, I'm not going to go in depth on any of the selections in this video. We want to keep this video nice, short, and tight. I've gone over these many times in previous videos for AoE as well as single target. So this is the build that I'm currently running. Keep in mind we are of course still running human as well for those 3 additional feats. And now if we jump right into the powers, again we're using Brood of Hadar. This is going to be your single target monster. You want to spam as many Brood of Hadars as you possibly can. Secondary, I believe I still have Tyrannical slotted, although for single target you shouldn't be using Tyrannical. As far as your personals go, we're still using Flames of Empowerment as well as ACC. And then the powers itself, I'm still using Hadar's Grasp. And then of course, Killing Flames. And then finally, your Pillars of Power. So any questions regarding the build or the powers, guys, go ahead and leave me a comment below. Alrighty, that's going to conclude today's video. That is going to be your Mod 14 Hellbringer Warlock AoE loadout as well as single target loadout. I think I went over everything. If I forgot something, please let me know. If you guys have any questions, leave a comment below. I believe I said that about 10 times in this video. But no, seriously, if you do have any questions, go ahead and leave me a comment below. I try to answer everyone. If you have any suggestions or if you find anything incorrect with anything I said, which go ahead, let me know. Nothing much has changed over the past few mods as far as the build itself. It's mainly gear upgrades and tweaking things here and there. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Like I said, this is your Mod 14 Warlock Hellbringer specific AoE and single target video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.